What is up, guys? Welcome to Illumination Lab. My name is Justin, and today I'll be going over some camera techniques within Cinema 4D and through traditional photography. It's a bit of a different video from normal today. I'm excited for this one. This is a short but good one today. So without further delay, let's get into the video. Alright, so in today's video, I'm going to go over 3 different important elements when it comes to both camera work, cameras within Cinema 4D, or even creating an art piece altogether. There's 3 essential elements that you need to keep in mind. Of course, there are lots of others, but today in this video, I'm going over these 3 different options that I feel is super important and what I try to incorporate into my scenes or my paintings as well. So the first one we're going to go over is composition. The second one is lighting. And last but not least, the third one is focus. And what I mean by focus is really the depth of field. And so being able to identify what our focus object is and being able to play around with depth of field to achieve a specific look or really help direct the viewer to a certain vantage point or a specific object. So there is a lot of things to go over as far as composition goes. So let's start with the rule of thirds. Imagine a grid on your frame and place key elements along those lines or intersections to give you more of a balanced look. Leading lines are like visual guides directing the viewer's gaze through the image. Think of roads, paths, or any lines that naturally draw attention. Framing adds a nice touch too. Use elements like either archways or branches to kind of frame your subject, bring focus and depth to your composition. Symmetry is straightforward but effective. A balanced composition where one side mirrors the other creates a good sense of order. Layers add depth, incorporate foreground, midground, and background elements to give your image more dimension. Textures and patterns are always really great to help kind of bring more of a richness to your piece. Details like rough surfaces or repetitive patterns can turn a simple scene into something that is actually a lot more intriguing. And so, of course, experiment with perspective, change your viewpoint. It's actually pretty surprising what changing your viewpoint can actually bring to a piece. It can kind of give you a breath of new life to either the subjects or what's going on, or give you just different angles. And so sometimes when I'm working on the project, I will sometimes go with a specific look, but throughout the process, as I'm kind of working on the project, I'll find a certain angle that's pretty interesting. So normally what I do is I'll just pop in the camera there and remember to incorporate that within my rendering. And then from there, I will identify what perspective I like from the finished pieces. Normally, I will have about 5 to 10 different renders, and really I'm just kind of figuring out if the scene kind of lines up correctly, if there's a certain perspective I want to take, or sometimes within Cinema 4D, just making sure that all my assets are essentially in the right place. Like if I have a cup on the table, the cup is actually sitting down on the table. So extremely important with working in Cinema 4D. A little bit easier when we're talking about traditional photography because, you know, there are physics involved, so you don't have to worry about you know, a cup floating on the table. So whenever you are doing photography, make sure that whatever you're taking a picture of, whether it's a specific object or even if it's some sort of scenery, feel free to kind of play around with the composition of the piece, because that will just kind of make it that much stronger. Of course, with all these post effects software programs, you can always go back, edit it, add in a few different interesting looks, but really to kind of get a either a really good render or a really good picture, it is extremely important to have composition in mind and really kind of take your time working the scene or the object. And like I said before, play around with different angles and perspectives, and learn about a few different principles of composition. And just by doing that, you'll start to see over time that you're a little bit more naturally inclined to kind of go towards those elements of art naturally without even having to think about it. So if you want to step up your either renders or just step up your photography in general, make sure that you are trying to work on the composition to get the best output available. And as I hop into Cinema 4D here, I'm going to use these primitives as an example. And so as I rotate the camera around the scene here, you can kind of get a better understanding of what different perspectives look like, and then also balancing out your piece as well too. And what's cool within Cinema 4D is in the camera settings here, there is an option where you can go down to composition and select grid or triangle or several different lines in general. So you can always have those tools to kind of better set up your composition and really get the most out of your render here. But again, with this camera, I'm just playing around with different perspectives, filling in the scene either on the left side here or the right side, and doing what I can to kind of get some sort of interesting look here. All in all though, whether it comes to photography or just the camera within Cinema 4D, composition is extremely important, and definitely one thing you need to remember or utilize whenever creating some sort of picture or render, because it's really going to take your art to the next level. Next up is lighting. So with lighting, make sure that you keep in mind that natural light sets the stage. The softness of morning or evening light can turn an ordinary scene into something extraordinary. So pay attention to its directions to kind of give you the best results, whether you're indoors or in the studio or even within Cinema 4D. Artificial light takes center stage. Adjust its intensity, direction, color to really set the mood or vibe that you want in your photos or within your renders. Shadows are your friends. They add depth and character to your shots, creating a more interesting composition. Or even when you're playing around at Cinema 4D, play around with lighting. They have tons of different light options and different settings you can use as far as the lights go. So make sure that you incorporate those shadows, because it really helps add that depth. As I said, backlighting adds a touch of magic too. Let light come from behind to kind of create silhouettes, emphasizing shapes and adding like some sort of mystery. This is really good, especially too if it's somewhat more abstract or some more of a grungy sort of a vibe that you're going for, or if you have if you're working a lot with black and whites, really utilizing backlighting and shadows, it can add an extra element for what you're going for. However, with that in mind, and make sure that balance is key. Find some sort of sweet spot between highlights and shadows to give your photos dimension and visual appeal. You definitely don't want to go into post and just make it so dark that it's kind of hard for the viewer to see, and also you don't want to make it so bright that it's kind of hard to look at too. So make sure that you kind of have a nice balance depending on what kind of theme you're going for, or what kind of goal you want. And so make sure that you find that sweet spot for both your highlights and your shadows. In portraits, soft, diffuse light works wonders. It smoothens out shadows and flattens your subject. It's kind of like that secret sauce for those stunning photos. So whether it's natural light or artificial, playing with light is like a painting a brush in photography. Experiment, observe, and let the light kind of help you actually tell your story. And then as we hop into Cinema 4D here, again, same thing applies within Cinema 4D. You have tons of options between, different area lights, spotlights, you have gobos, you have HDRIs to kind of help bring a specific look or feel to the atmosphere. And so I think what's unique about Cinema 4D versus actual photography is you have a lot more control as far as the lighting goes. Unfortunately, with photography, especially outside, you're only limited to so much either light or just even sunlight in general. So sometimes you have to kind of work with the time of day, where in Cinema 4D, you have a lot more options where you could pull up a sky rig, you could set it to 12 in the afternoon, you could set it to morning, you could set it to night, and so you can achieve a lot of different looks without having to either wait for that time or set it up in some sort of studio. So again, whether it's photography or Cinema 4D, lighting is extremely important, especially with renders too. I know myself, I've made renders where I thought it was an adequate enough light, and I go and render it, and it's just kind of this dark image that really doesn't have a lot of light to it. So you might find for your first couple of renders that those renders are kind of meant to help you either add in a little bit more light or kind of fix the scene a little bit. And then once you get to render 5 through 10, that's where you can kind of hone in a few different elements there. So lighting is super important. So no matter if it's photography or Cinema 4D, make sure that your lighting is good, because even though we do have post-effects software, just having that lighting there, or even with creating some sort of a story or mood, the lighting really helps set the tone. So again, another element that you really should be utilizing within a given scene or within photography. Last up is focus / depth of field. So whenever looking at a picture, video, or anything in Cinema 4D, it brings an extra element to your scene or photograph. It helps you focus a lot more on a given object, or allows you to kind of guide the viewer to tell them what you're looking at or tell them what to look at. Depth of field refers to a range of sharpness in a photo from the nearest to the farthest elements. It's a powerful tool that can really help transform your images and renders. A shallow depth of field achieved with a wide aperture brings your subject into sharp focus while blurring the background in such a really unique way. This technique directs the viewer's attention, making the subject stand out and creating a pleasing visual of separation between the focus item and the background. And so conversely, a depth of field achieved with a smaller aperture keeps more of the scene sharp from the front to the back. This is ideal for capturing landscapes or scenes where you want every detail to essentially be in focus. Understanding when to use depth of field is like having a secret language in photography. It allows you to convey emotions, highlight focal points, and guide the viewer's experience. Experimenting with depth of field adds a layer of creativity to your photography or renders. It's about making intentional choices to kind of elevate your storytelling. So Whether you're isolating a subject in a background or capturing a sweeping landscape in detail, mastering depth of field is important to creating visually captivating photos. So as we hop into Cinema 4D, what's actually really cool is Cinema 4D has a setting within camera. If you go into camera and select optical, there is a depth of field option there, so you can actually select the item that you want to actually focus on. You can play around with the aperture, you can play around with the different focus levels here. So you always have a lot of different settings to really play around with. It is extremely important that when you're playing with depth of field to turn on bokeh. If you don't do that, you're really not going to see the effects here. So I'm going to play around with a few different settings, and you can see what kind of look pops up in the render view here, where you can see that as I play around with settings, you can kind of get a different feel, and even just playing with the depth of field adds a different element to the render view here, because again, if we're keeping composition in mind, we have our lighting here. If we can play with the depth of field, it kind of just adds another level to the render view here of what we're looking at. So we could take something as simple as just primitives and make some interesting looks from that. So as we play around with a few different settings, you can see in the render view that we are getting a few different looks, and really, whether it's photography or it's Cinema 4D, a lot of the times if we can evoke emotion within our renders or our photographs, that's the biggest thing you can do as a photographer or as someone that is either creating art in Cinema 4D or just renders in general. You can tell a story through your art or your pictures, or really play around with different elements and get to know what's really important as far as art elements to incorporate into your renders or photography. That's going to kind of help you get to the next level and really find that you'll be a bit more happy with the pieces that you get from that. So all right, so that's the end of the video. Like I said, it was a short one today, a little bit different than what I typically do. This was actually a requested video from one of the subscribers here, and so I just wanted to go over a few different elements, both in photography and Cinema 4D, really what to look for when you're working with a camera. And so, like I said before, there are tons of different art elements to really look into and really study to help kind of take yourself to the next level. But in my personal opinion, I think these three, both lighting, depth of field, and also composition, is kind of the foundational elements that everyone should keep in mind. And so let me know what you think down in the comment section. If you have a video request for yourself, feel free to pop it in there and I will get to that. Other than that, it's almost a tradition now. I have to go over it. I do have a lot of projects down the pipeline, so I'm just rendering a few different animations for you guys, so it's a little bit longer. So again, just stay patient with me. These renders are a little bit longer, and it does take time to get those going. So like always, I appreciate that you watched my video today. Look out for a few new ones here in the next couple weeks. Other than that, you guys have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you on the next one.